So e-commerce is growing in Brazil at a rate of about 20% a year. For that, to explain to us what's going on with that and what are the trends in e-commerce, we invited Renata Quintini. Renata, please join us. Renata is partner at Felicis Ventures. She's also in our team at Bay Brazil, guiding us, educating us about all the trends in e-commerce. And I'm sorry, I apologize to the attorneys in the room, but Renata is a recovery attorney. She went from being an attorney to an investor. And I'll let you with Renata. Obrigada.
Thank you, Margarita. Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure for me to be here with you today and actually in this room because it brings back a lot of memories. I have my former classmate Evan here in the audience, and I used to take lots of classes here in this own classroom 9 years ago, and it's a little bittersweet for me to be here, and it's great to actually be on this side with slides, first time for me. I'm going to breeze through this so we have more time for the panel and we can actually discuss the true problems, the true opportunities, and then have a more interactive conversation. But just to kind of set up the stage, I just want to quickly address why is everyone still caring about Brazilian e-commerce and bring to bear a few distinctions about why the Brazilian e-consumer is a little bit different than the American one, and how should we think about building businesses to this different type of consumer. A lot of work to do, lots of bottlenecks, and we'll talk about how to unclog that, and I still think that there are opportunities. Like Margarita said, e-commerce Brazil is growing, not only because people are putting more money to work, but also more people are having access to the internet and more people are buying on the internet, right? And investors, venture capitalists love growth because if stuff doesn't grow, we don't make money. So everyone's paying attention. But if we look a little bit under the hood, and this is, I think, the interesting story, right? Is growth still going to happen? Everyone's talking about what's going on with the riots in Brazil and the slowdown in the economy. Is there still growth to be had? I believe so for two different reasons. Number one, you see that internet penetration and e-commerce penetration both lag the US quite significantly. So everything else stops and just these two trends continue to increase, more people will be buying online. But then also if you look into penetration by segment, you see that the C class is very underrepresented, right? A lot of people in the A and B class have access to the internet, they're starting to buy, but the C class is lagging quite a bit. And if you bring the C class to where the A and B class are today, just in level of penetration, that's 30 million new e-shoppers that could potentially bring more businesses to the internet, right? So there's something there. But who is this Brazilian consumer and what do they care about? Something that's really interesting about the Brazilian consumer, and this is a Morgan Stanley and AlphaWise research, comparing to the American consumer, Brazilians love to compare prices, and for them flexibility of payment is a big, big driver. I think here in the US, the key reasons why people shop online is convenience, is free shipping, free returns. And you see, that's not a huge driver for Brazil. It's more, okay, let me compare prices. And if you actually go back to the history of e-commerce in Brazil, I mean, price comparison was one of the first things that started, right? It was sort of really generalist stuff. Let me price compare, let me have access to stuff. And if you go up, because it's cheaper, I mean, it's kind of similar to the US, saves time, kind of similar to the US. The convenience stuff is very on par, but let me compare, let me have flexibility to pay. And why don't Brazilians shop online? And then here again, too, the differences versus the US. First of all, can I trust that the products will get on time and they'll be safe or not lost or not damaged? That's a huge problem in Brazil. And it's a big concern, a big reason why people don't buy. And I mean, not a big problem in the US. Other big problem is that there's no credit card. I mean, people don't have credit cards to pay, or there are no flexible payment methods. So these are pretty important bottlenecks that need to be solved for Brazilian e-commerce to, in my opinion, to take off even more. So, the big bottleneck, logistics, things are a little bit better, of course. Before you had the monopoly of the post office that was the only entity in charge for delivery, and today you have a few private providers that compete for that business, so brought a little bit the cost down, somewhat reliability, and you see that for the overall country, deliveries get on time roughly 80% of the time, but there's a lot of discrepancy in quality of service. If you think about what happens in São Paulo and Rio versus what happens in the rest of Brazil, right? And that's something that needs to change, right? I have an investment in a company down in Brazil called baby.com.br. Think of it as a diapers.com meets Zulily. And the cost of delivering things is prohibitive, and sometimes you get an order for something in the northeast of Brazil. It's not, you're paying to fulfill that client, depending on the size of the order and all of that stuff. And that's not a good business to be in. So there's a lot of discrepancy on where your customer is located, how much it costs to serve that customer, level of satisfaction. And also Brazil, because it's a legislation system where you have states with a lot of legislative power, there are also a lot of intrastate taxation that happens. So actually finding someone who understands, how do I move a package from one state to the other? Where should my distribution center be located? And where are the tax efficiencies that I can get is a really important skill, something very hard to do. I was talking to someone that was telling me that even the size of the box that you put stuff in will change dramatically the tax you pay, because if it's sort of like a flat box that looks kind of like an envelope is one thing, but if something different, then it's a different classification of product altogether, and the taxation is different. So logistics getting better, but still a long, long way to go. And then the second one too is, payments, right? Today, people are still paying by credit card. It's still the preferred method of payment. Brazilians are very crafty. They came up with something called boleto. For you who don't know what boleto is, so my first time here in the US, I went to the bank to try to pay a bill, and people looked at me like I was an insane person. In Brazil, people actually go to the bank to pay stuff. So boleto allows you to go on a website, print a slip with a barcode that says, okay, this is your invoice, go to the bank and pay. Then the bank sends a notification to the company saying, okay, transaction completed, go ship. A lot of people trust this method more, so they actually ask companies to issue boleto, but the drop-off rate between issuance of boleto and payment is quite significant. And something interesting that is going to happen, and you should watch as a trend, is the rise of the debit card as a payment method. Cash management in operations in Brazil is very complicated, because I was looking at a research, about 25% of purchases, they get settled on less than 3 installments, but then another 25% get settled 10 installments and more. In Brazil, it's very common for you to go and pay 12 installments of $5. You as a company, you're putting all the costs up front, but you're taking 12 months to receive your money back. That's a very hard cash management situation to be in, right? The debit card, on the other hand, they can't even give installment settlement with the client, but the company gets paid up front, and that's a huge change. So increasing debit card penetration is a really interesting trend to watch. And even if you look into credit card penetration, majority of A and B class have access to credit cards, but the C and D penetration of credit cards as a method of payment is still low. So people are resorting to boletos or PayPal. So people go online, they want to buy, they can't. That needs to improve. And where are the opportunities, right? So e-commerce in Brazil, I said, started a lot with comparison shopping, or you had big brands that were brick and mortar coming up with online brands and presence as well, and it was access to big box electronics, books, music, cosmetics, but there are still a lot of verticals where the reach of retail online is still lagging quite a bit. And And that's where I think e-commerce 2.0 and then what I'm going to talk about, the 3.0 later, is starting to come. So you're seeing now people start to cut off the middleman and engage in a true experience with the consumer. Before it was that same box you could get on Lojas Americanas, which is the Walmart of Brazil, sort of. You could go online and try to find a better price. But now people are creating products, people are creating brands, and having that sort of entertainment relationship with the consumer. So now instead of going to search for something, you're going to discover. Right? So you have OPA here, which is a company that created a furniture line online. You know, Lema 21 is sort of Warby Parker for Brazil. Sophie Juliette, they do MLM of jewelry. Oh, look, is fashion. So now it's creating a brand, and it's something very different. And here, you know, the whole idea of, yes, I find something that works in the US, let me go back and try to apply, it doesn't work like that. You need to understand who the Brazilian people are, what drives them, what type of emotional attachments they have, what is the behavior that they're looking for, and you need to craft something just for them. Some brands have started to be created like this, and I believe there's going to be more to come. And also, I think marketplaces, which basically you don't create anything, but you've garner supply, you garner demand, and you create a web property where they connect and they can transact. There's some verticals in Brazil that have a very, very large market, and these types of businesses tend to grow very fast, and they're sort of winner-take-all mentality. I mean, think real estate, think insurance, think Elo7, sort of the Etsy of Brazil, and there are, I think, many more to come. But there, if you're going to build a business there, I think, is this market big enough? Because some verticals aren't, but I believe there are more to be created. And last but not least, mobile commerce, and we're going to talk more about that on the panel. Just the share of transactions closed up on mobile devices has been climbing up, and one of my portfolio companies has been telling me that they see, depending on the month, anywhere from 15 to 20% of their purchases being made on a mobile device, and that number just growing up. And that's really, really interesting, because the demographic of a consumer that owns a mobile device is different than the average consumer. The type of experience that they need is different. And also, mobile, there's something about creating a need and closing that transaction on the spot. So the types of services that you need to offer and the type of convenience is very different than having a web property. But this is a very interesting trend, and just at the beginning. You see in January it was only 2.5% overall e-commerce and climbing up. I'll save time for questions during the panel. This was just to tee off, give some background information to make the discussion hopefully a little more lively or more informed for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Renata. And our moderator for the hour is Czerny, founder and CEO of Playphone, Bay Brazil board member. Please also joining us, Karl Mehta, partner at Menlo Ventures. Thank you, Karl. And Piovesan, mobile and content business development at Mozilla. Thank you all for joining us.
Nice.
Well,
I just want to tell you, some of us are tweeting under the hashtag BayBrazil, so if you are tweeting, please add the hashtag BayBrazil. Thank you.
Thank you, Margarita. We'll get started. We have hopefully about 40 to 45 minutes. Thank you, everybody, for being part. This is an amazing panel, a lot of knowledge here, so I'll talk about myself in 1 minute. I run Playphone Daytime. I'm a proud board member of Bay Brazil, and also I run an association called MEF, Mobile Entertainment Forum. I'm the chairman for North America, which is in charge of setting policies in the mobile industry. In Brazil, we partner with Anatel, and we set the policy of how to purchase in mobile devices. So we have Renata already kind of introduced herself a little bit, so I'm going to ask Karl Mehta here from Menlo Ventures to talk a couple minutes about himself and his background in the e-commerce and the mobile.
Thanks, Ron, and thanks for inviting me. Glad to be here. I'm a venture partner at Menlo Ventures, which is a early to late stage venture capital fund right here in Menlo Park. Prior to that, I founded a company called Playphone, which was we ran for about 5 years and was acquired by Visa about 2 years back. And I spent 2 years at Visa working on online and mobile commerce and payment systems. I also spent about a year last year as a White House Innovation Fellow, where I worked with the Department of Treasury, State Department, DoD on some electronic transaction systems worldwide, and Brazil definitely figured in that. I have never lived or done any business inside Brazil, but my company that I built in mobile and online game payment system, Playphone, a third of my customers were from Brazil. So my perspective about Brazil, whatever I can share here, would be more from a U.S. entrepreneur doing business in Brazil, and the challenges and the opportunities that we saw. So thank you.
Thank you. Ron Piovesan from Mozilla.
Great. Thank you very much, Ron, and thank you, Marguerite, for this opportunity. My name is Ron Piovesan. I'm with Mozilla. We're best known for Firefox, the browser. But we will be launching a phone, Firefox OS, which is a phone that is basically powered by the Firefox browser. And it's actually already been launched, but our marquee market will be Brazil. We'll be launching there in a few weeks, hopefully. And yeah, spent a bit of time in Brazil, going down there, talking to carriers, talking to operators, talking to content providers to get content onto the phone. And then prior to that, I was with Cisco for a number of years, and actually spent some time in Brazil with Cisco doing research into the venture market. So it seems like regardless of what job I jump to, I always seem to find myself flying down to Brazil. And no, my Portuguese has not improved.
Very good. I'll start with kind of just background information. Renata covered a lot of answers of my questions, but here it goes. Brazil is the largest e-commerce market in Latin America, with annual e-commerce sales of about $10 billion. When total retail sales is about $336 billion, so only about 3.6% of the total retail sales is e-commerce. In the US, the same ratio is about 6%. Why in Brazil the ratio of e-commerce sales is so much lower than other markets, and is so much such a small fraction of the total retail sales? Renata?
I think it's we're lagging in development. I mean, Brazil is probably US 3 to 5 years ago, and the gap is closing. If you think about how e-commerce started developing, I talked a little bit about just the generalist stuff and people finding online probably cheaper or more convenient, and then later too the daily deals. I mean, Piovesan and the like. For many people, that was their first online e-commerce experience. They found something that was heavily discounted, and they tried. It's a manicure or a massage. It's something that they already know, and the price was very compelling. And if they had a good experience, that sort of greased their elbows to kind of go back and try to buy something else. Now you're seeing brands being created. You're seeing more opportunity. But something that we cannot forget, Amazon is not in Brazil. eBay is not in Brazil. And I don't know what percentage of total e-commerce is Amazon, but my guess is that's pretty significant. I'll actually look at that.
I'll cover that.
So these folks are not there. And it's, on one hand, is a good opportunity for new entrants to establish relationships with consumers and have a viable business, because here in the US, if you want to go into the moving boxes business, the first question I ask is, how are you going to do it better than Amazon? Nobody can. At least do it cheaper, right? So that's why you have to create experiences, unique brands, or something that Amazon cannot be in the business of. So the fact that these guys are not there yet is something that justifies the lag, but also creates opportunities for new entrants. But I think the gap is going to close.
Anybody else?
Yeah. Well, before I answer that, I would like to just take a step back and talk about the broader context of e-commerce. What I've experienced is that e-commerce or m-commerce, they are really a key driver for an overall economy. So they really help countries, and especially developing countries, in their overall social development and infrastructure development. Because when e-commerce companies go into a country or build large businesses, the underlying infrastructure that they build in terms of the logistics, in terms of the payment infrastructure, that could be used for so many other industries. Think about the broadband penetration that it drives, and that can be helped for education and healthcare and lots of other industries, so that thrives. So there is a huge indirect GDP impact of the growth of e-commerce that I think most policymakers, governments, and even analysts and people, they kind of miss that. I saw that firsthand when I was working in the government as a White House fellow, and looked at several developing countries, and we, rather than giving away money as kind of grants and governments trying to shore money as kind of subsidies, I was a strong proponent of saying, hey, let's develop some technology industries here, because that will help develop your infrastructure. Like the payment industry, that is the key underlining the linchpin for e-commerce. That helps to drive remittances, because the payment infrastructure that we build as Visas or MasterCards or whatever, that create remittances between people to people, people living here sending money to Brazil or to Mexico, things like that. So I want people to think at the broader context and see that how e-commerce and m-commerce helps. Coming to Brazil, that why it's lagging compared to US as a benchmark. Well, fundamentally, e-commerce is a very, unlike what most people think, e-commerce is a very capital intensive industry. So people think that, wow, e-commerce, so I don't have to invest in real estate and the stores and things like that. But if you look at any e-commerce company that has been successful, they've burnt hundreds of millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars over several years. So in order to develop e-commerce, not just as a particular company, but in a country level, you need risk capital, and you need a lot of that risk capital. Look at how many years Amazon took to become profitable, how much money that they put in. So you got to have that venture capital, and risk capital available in Brazil, who is willing to put in money behind some very strong entrepreneur, like the Bezos of the world. And then you have to have the capacity and the patience to stay in the game for 5 to 8 years and lose money. Ron knows how much patience it takes to build the business. So that's one thing that I don't think that we have seen that yet in Brazil. The second thing is I think there's a lot of infrastructure issues still out there. At least that's what I experienced doing my business in Brazil, which is there is not just the logistics, but it's the payment infrastructure is still not very developed. We see all those charts here that Renata showed, 73% credit card penetration, but those numbers only they look good on the chart. The reality is not like that. Almost 2 out of 3 customers of mine couldn't pay with a credit card. So so there's a lot of nuances and a lot of data that you have to go beyond this nice bar charts and things like that. The other big issue is taxation. It's just it's outrageous. It's ridiculous. From it's part of the reason we couldn't set up an entity. Well, first of all, we couldn't do a lot of e-commerce business despite having great opportunity. There's this 15% some remittance tax. So every time we'll sell something and we want to take the money back to the country, we'll lose 15%. Now, it's okay, in digital goods, somehow you can manage the margins, but in physical goods, when you're running an e-commerce business at less than, at about 5% margin, that's what Amazon runs its business, you're just dead on arrival. I mean, it's just a non-starter. So those are some of those issues that I've experienced, which I feel has to be structurally addressed at the policy-making level, at the government level, at the industry level, and then we'll start seeing some fast growth.
Ron, any comments on this?
Actually, probably one of the most interesting stats that I'd love to see isn't, whether or not Amazon or eBay are in Brazil. I would love to see how many purchases on Amazon.com, the US version, or eBay.com, the US version, are made from Brazil. Because from when I speak to, when I'm down there and I'm talking to people, everyone's buying off of Amazon, everyone's buying off of eBay, and guess what's the one address they're not shipping it to? Their Brazilian address. They're shipping it to a cousin in California or someplace else. So I think it's, I've seen a million stats that Brazilians are, the most online people, the most socially, they're the largest consumer. I think for a long time they're the largest consumers of social networks, not including Orkut, which is your own little enjoy. But so the stats add up that Brazilians, as a, if one can make a generalization, get online, whether it's social or m-commerce or e-commerce, but it's so darn hard to do it. And getting product in can't be done. I mean, almost. Getting product out, good luck. So, and I know that there's a term, and I should know it because I've heard it enough times, but there's a wonderful term that I think you used to basically, it's a single word to mean to get around things.
Jeitinho.
I'm sure that word's going to come up several times over the course of today.
Jeitinho.
Jeitinho.
Wait.
And that to me is that's applied to e-commerce just like anything else. And you get around it by buying off the US version, shipping it to a cousin, flying up here, picking it up, and flying back. And you know what? That's cheaper.
Yeah.
That's what's killing e-commerce. And then I have another thing on access too, but we can talk about that.
No, well, for the first question, that was pretty good. All right. So let's, we talked a lot about Amazon, and just to give you context, Amazon in US alone, sales in 2012 was 34 billion, 3 times more the entire e-commerce in Brazil. So that is...
Half of that was Brazilians.
I don't have that data here. But everybody says Amazon is not doing business in Brazil. They tried several times. They launched and they left and they went back. Do we think, or do you think, Amazon will ever be successful in Brazil? Who wants to take it?
I think it's a matter of timing, right? And they're trying now to start again with the e-books and other stuff. Bezos is a smart guy who can figure it out.
Yes or no?
I think it's yes, matter of time.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they had a few false start, and I can compare their experience with India. And same thing. Amazon is not there like in its full, full capacity in India, but they have like this limited rollout. What they do today in Brazil with this digital ebooks, and I think they have in the public statement, at least what Bezos has said is they've blamed it on 2 things. One is on infrastructure, and second is on taxation. So Amazon tries its very best to do how to work within the tax system, even in the U.S. And I think they face the same issue that I faced in my company because if Amazon sets up a company and then they sell physical goods there, and if they have to leave 15% before bringing the money back to the U.S., there's no margin; they'll lose money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, further, they also lose margin because there's such high import taxes too.
Right.
So we were trying. So one reason why. So we're developing a low-cost phone. I can talk. It's not quite the Amazon example, but I think it's analogous.
We're going to come to the mobile party. You can talk about it.
Okay. Well, I'll save the phone story then for a little bit. I'll be a little contrarian, and will Amazon ultimately, before the Earth blows up, will it be successful in Brazil? I'm sure it will be. It's got the name. It's got real estate down there.
Actually, the name is probably one of their worst enemies.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But I think what's happened is the bloom has come off Brazil a little bit, right? I mean, I think there was a lot of excitement a number of years ago. Tons of money flowing in. There's tons of venture capital money flowing in. Tons of VC firms flowing in. I was with Cisco. We were right at the height of that. We saw guys coming in like crazy. Who's left there? I mean, hardly anyone. I think there's 1 or 2 firms that actually set up shop and stayed. The rest all folded. U.S. based, or European based. I think and you look at a bar chart, and Brazil is one of the most attractive markets in the world, and I think it is. I'm a massive fan of Brazil, but until it makes life easier to get things into the country and out of the country, and makes things easier to buy stuff, and makes things easier to transact, I think a lot of the larger companies, if they didn't succeed during the heady days when everyone was excited about Brazil, now there's probably less incentive to go in.
Okay. So this is not very exciting information, but I'll then get to something more positive. The other day, somebody told me I have to join in the positive team. How do you put that one? Not be so negative. There you go. Okay. So Brazil ranks number 130 out of 185 countries on the World Bank's 2013 Ease of Doing Business. 130 out of 185 countries. Pretty good rank, but actually, you want to be number 1, not number 130. That means it's extremely difficult in doing business in Brazil. Do we think e-commerce business falls into that category? And what are the main barriers of doing or building a successful business in Brazil in e-commerce? Now, we already talked a lot about this, but try to elaborate on the success stories, lesson learned of not only we know it's very difficult, but how success stories happen and were successful. Anybody?
Well, I think part of the motivation behind, I'm sure there's several motivations behind why it's so difficult to transact business in Brazil, but part of the motivation is, I think, there's a strong desire on the part of the Brazilian government to basically create barriers of entry so indigenous companies have an opportunity to thrive, right? That's not true? That's the sense one gets. Certainly, and the reason why I say that is because whenever we go in and we're trying to do business in Brazil, there's always a new directive saying, oh, you'll get a break if you use a Brazilian company. You'll get it, or it has to, all of a sudden has to contain X amount of Brazilian content or be created by a Brazilian manufacturer. So I think, in terms of opportunities to succeed, sure, I'm sure that does create some opportunities for local businesses to succeed because they don't have, huge foreign competition. Whether that's better for the consumer or whether that's better for the overall e-commerce ecosystem in Brazil, I'm not so sure.
So the company that I invested in, the time that I invested, it was literally two gringos and a PowerPoint. There wasn't a business, there wasn't anything. And they were able to bring a group of investors to back them. It took them 6 months to get the company in Brazil incorporated. There wasn't a history, there wasn't anything. But to get started from ground up, 6 months. For them to get a visa, it was longer than that. And that, that delayed things for them for quite a bit. And then you get started, you want to hire people. Talent in Brazil, it's, not a lot of people have done things in internet businesses. It's a rare, small number of people. So there's a lot of poaching, a lot of people kind of dancing musical chairs. One day they're here, the other day they're there. And as a result, salaries went up to the roof. And at the same time, you also saw a lot of venture capital come in and give money for companies to start, so they had money to spend and bid themselves up to hire employees, and it was expensive. Employees don't have the same mentality of taking risks as people here in the US do. So if you go to someone and say, you have a decent salary, but your real upside is on the options I'm going to give you, because so then if this what you're building becomes successful, you're going to own a piece of that success. That doesn't work. And until this day, I talk for my companies with potential hires, and that's a sticky point. And I'm used to working for Petrobras and making this amount of money. The whole cut me 50% off and give me something in the future never flies, or very, very seldomly flies. It's better, but still a problem. Success, the thing though about Brazilians or people trying to do stuff in Brazil, I think it's a mixture of the jeitinho and the resilience and just figuring stuff out and that optimism to keep going. But it's hard. Like Ron mentioned, venture capital has pulled back a little bit, and you still have some folks carrying the flag really well, and we have some of them here in the room in the audience that are going to talk to you at some point. But that lack of stable ecosystem doesn't help. Another thing too that we saw was just the rise of competition, right? There was one company that started doing A because they thought it was successful somewhere else. A month after, 3 or 4 were after the same thing. And you go like, why? And some of them got funded, and it just diverts attention to the consumer. It increases the cost to acquire customers because everybody's bidding for the same keywords or the same channels. You're poaching the same people, so it just makes it harder, right? You creative people figure something else out to do. So there was a little bit of that too going on. But there are companies that are growing, doing well in revenues, raising a Series B, going on Series C, and I mean, some companies like Netshoes in the brink of Brazil needs happy success stories to just get more people excited to take a risk and try out. But there's a increasing glimmer of that. Not easy, but folks are still trying, which is good.
Yeah, well, besides all the challenges that I highlighted, I think there are success stories, and obviously Brazil is a very attractive market. We made some investments as Menlo Ventures, but one of the companies that I like in the e-commerce space is Dafiti. I know it's controversial. It's my friend Samber Brothers, the Rocket Internet Group, they back it, but I think it has the potential to become the next Amazon, or it's about to go public. It's roughly about $200 million in revenue. They've raised more than $200 million, so they have that capital that I talked about earlier to stay in the game and grow their business. And hopefully one or two of these big IPOs that would come out of Brazil in the tech space, in the e-commerce space, I think that would in general lift everybody else, both the optimism as well as the infrastructure and the right policy making.
Yeah, because the stock market in Brazil is actually fairly concentrated. And there is investor demand for technology options, but there are just not that many companies that become an option, right?
Yeah.
And so the Dafiti and Netshoes or somebody like that,
yes,
getting that currency and
yep,
totally agree.
Great. Let's shift a little bit to the mobile business. We talked a lot about e-commerce, online companies. Let's get into the mobile. And Brazil, there is a part of the briefing says that there is 227 million phone lines in Brazil, one of the largest country in the world in number of active phone lines, about 180 million phone users, close to 50 million smartphones right now in Brazil. So, but mobile commerce in Brazil reached $2 billion in 2012. Same period in US, 25 billion. With so many people connected, with carrier billing available in literally every single phone, why mobile commerce is not much, much larger? Anybody?
Well, so I think we peel through the numbers. First of all, when you say how many mobile phones you mentioned? 200?
There is 227 million phone lines, but about 180 million unique users.
Right. So I believe 80% of that would be prepaid phones, right? And the reason why in the U.S. we have $25 billion in mobile commerce is probably 80% of that is driven through smartphones and tablets. So if you now take your Brazilian numbers and say how many of that 200 million plus phones, how many are prepaid, how many are featured, and how many are smartphones and tablets, then you will see the numbers that you still need to grow. And it's not about the phones. It's about the smartphone, because you need a smartphone to do some kind of a shopping. Right, so that's number one. Number two, I think in order to do mobile, again, I'm coming back to my core business of payments, but in order to do any mobile commerce, it's super awkward. It's like almost impossible to type in your credit card number or any kind of payment details. So the reason why my Amazon one-click on my cell phone works is because my credentials are all stored there, and I can do it one click. That just doesn't really exist very well in Brazil. Means whatever limited number of e-commerce providers that you have, they don't have that ability for whatever reason. And then the third data point that you mentioned, Ron, about the carrier billing, right? The same problem, which is carrier billing, great, it works, as you said, and I think you've done a great job in making that happen. But how much does carriers charge? They charge an outrageous amount of fee for that. What, 50%? I don't know what the new thing is, but 30? So, you could somehow manage that within digital goods, but you can't do any physical goods e-commerce with 30%. Your margins are at best like, net margin after everything is like 20%, even gross margins are 50%, but you take out all the infrastructure, shipping, everything else costs. Your 20% net margin, that's what, and Amazon works on at 5% net margin, and now you have 30% to give to carriers. So carrier billing is broken, it doesn't work. So you can't have m-commerce going up without you fix the payment system infrastructure, and you got to get more smartphones and tablets out there.
Anybody else?
No, I mean I completely agree with Karl, and we've noticed the same market. Like our phone is a smartphone, but it's aimed at a feature phone audience. So yeah, I mean, I think, you know, setting aside Firefox, the opportunity, the enormous opportunity, and I think what gets a lot of people excited, not just us, but, you know, even like Nokia and Android and everybody else, is there's a massive, massive population in Brazil that is very, very tech savvy, despite, you know, some classification. You know, they're savvy. There is an increase in disposable income. They want to buy stuff. They want the tools to buy stuff, and I think that's why you're seeing a lot of people come into Brazil with, you know, low-cost features, low-cost smartphones, maybe even low-cost tablets. I mean, I think that would be great. I haven't seen any, but I'm sure somebody's thinking about it. And I think that would be a huge driver to m-commerce. I think it's terribly exciting.
Okay. Maybe I'll jump to with just a couple more questions that we open up to the audience. 5 years from now, would m-commerce surpass e-commerce in Brazil?
Yes.
Ron?
Yeah, no, sure.
Renata?
Well, if the infrastructure problems get solved, right? Right.
There's
And
always
it's
the-
that big if. I don't know.
Okay.
I'll be
So
the-
yes, one, I don't know.
No.
But yes, it's 30%. The carriers in Brazil do charge 30% for digital and durable goods. And there is double taxation because how the Anatel set up the whole m-commerce in Brazil, and they're trying to fix that right now. So there is multiple factors that actually is almost a 50% differentiation from a 3% credit card charge versus
crazy,
the
huh?
carrier charge. So that's, I think, one of the reasons m-commerce is not working yet, but 5 years' time, with 100+ million smartphones, hopefully the carriers will figure this out. There is a legislation going on right now, a discussion, we're part of it, MAF is part of it with Anatel, trying to fix this, to remove that double taxation and remove this. The 30% is up to the carriers. You cannot change their mind, but there is now a movement on the carrier side to be very competitive with the credit card companies within the next 3 to 5 years. So I think that will
You
be
think 5 years is enough?
I think 5 years is enough. I think that's just the 3 years, no. Yeah, 5 years is about right. Yeah?
5 years is 5 years is a long time in internet business.
In the technology business.
9 out of 10 companies go out of business by that time. They don't have money left.
Well, 2 years is already like wipes out.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, last kind of I just wrote it down as we were talking here, but it's just a question to just pick your brains. We have now 3. We're talking about smartphones, and there's 3 leading operating systems from Windows, Android, and Apple. We know the Brazilians are very engaged. They were very engaged with Nokia, with Symbian technology, now part of the Microsoft group. And who will be the winner 5 years from now in Brazil? Who will be the winner? Apple, Android, or Microsoft?
Android.
I'd love to say
Android.
Microsoft just to see everyone's look on everyone's face.
Microsoft. Okay.
I'll bet on Android.
Android.
Okay, 3. All right, we're open for questions. If anybody, please just raise your hand, come up.
Vanessa will pass the mic.
So we'll start over here. There's one up there. Go ahead, just can approach the mic, and he'll be in a second.
Thanks. Well, thank you for your time. I had a quick question about the kind of angel investment scene or the early stage venture scene. Could you describe that a little more in Brazil? Is there one? Where does this Brazilian startup, for example, go or to get funded, to get started?
Anyone?
Well, I'm involved in one. I'm a limited partner in 500 Startups, which is an early stage incubator fund, and we invest in Brazil. We take geeks on the plane, and we've gone down there and met up with, set up some kind of startup weekend type of networking stuff, and talk to entrepreneurs there. But you could talk to us here in Mountain View. Just look up 500 Startups.
Yeah, I think that there are some incubators and accelerators started, and they tend to be more concentrated in Rio, São Paulo, Belo Horizonte, but I heard that Victoria has one too, and they're actually coming here to the US to bring people who want to have businesses to do with Brazil and taking people back.
And actually, at Bay Brazil, we're trying to help on that front as well. We're talking to a lot of companies. They are trying to invest in Brazil and vice versa, technology companies from Brazil, the government itself. Yeah. We're trying to find a way to expose that through the website and through events, a way to help companies start business in Brazil and vice versa, Brazilian companies to start business in the US. Go ahead.
Hi. What is the nota fiscal requirement in Brazil? How is it impacting the e-commerce? Export-import requirement, nota fiscal, which is the requirement for export-import, which is in the Department of Commerce. I'm implementing a Brazilian service delivery supply chain, and there are a lot of regulations which are not familiar with other countries, especially movement of goods outside and inside. And if the part is inside the country, to just get it back inside, it needs a regulations where the stamp from the department with the invoice amount has to be put in and it has to come back. So a lot of things are there. How is the e-commerce, the delivery system inside e-commerce, how will it handle that? I don't know, anybody that...
So if I understood correctly, you're saying there's a lot of regulation for import, export of durable goods. It's very complex to get permits and certifications and so forth. How is on the e-commerce front? Is it easier? Does it require any type of special permit or regulation or registry? Anybody?
No, I mean, the companies that I work with didn't require any special regulation, but you need to understand that you're somewhat creating a new category, so how will the current regulations apply to the business that you're building? It's a little tricky, right? And you're right, in terms of import, even if you want to hire external, so if you want to come to the US to hire someone to help you with SEO, you pay 50% tax on that.
Wow.
Yeah. Like even things like that, if you want to hire external service, it's a 50% tax. So, it's old rules, I guess, that haven't changed and should be modified to help startup businesses, but as far as I know, no.
So it's all applicable. The same rules are applicable for any type of business, doesn't matter if it's e-commerce or not. All right.
Hi, one very simple question for those of us who don't know how Brazil works. What is this 30% charged by the phone company you're talking about? What is it applied on? I didn't understand what you were saying.
So when you run a charge on your phone bill and you want to buy a $10 item, the retail price $10, the carriers will take 30% just to process that charge. That's what they call the transaction fee. Credit card will charge 3, the carriers will charge 30. That's what it is. Thank you.
So I would like to ask you about innovation on e-commerce in Brazil. Renata said if you get a model that works here, doesn't work, it's not just apply in the Brazilian market. So because of that, we have seen a lot of innovation there. One of the best examples, I think, it's like Magazine Você, from the second biggest retailer in Brazil, and they are using Facebook. They are using their customers to evangelize, to act as evangelists and sell for their friends. And we have a bunch of small innovative projects there. So what do you think about the other way around? If some e-commerce projects in Brazil, if they can go abroad and scale in international level?
Anybody wants to take this? How, basically, the question is, can projects, e-commerce projects that were developed in Brazil, can be applied internationally successfully? Can they be competitive? And how would they do to export that knowledge or that concept? Because we talk a lot about, it's very difficult to Amazon to go to Brazil, or success e-commerce here to go there, because just the way they build their business, their margins will not be applicable in Brazil, but can the other way around work?
Well,
Well, I am a strong believer in that, you know, if you can make a business successful in a developing country, you could become successful worldwide, because the amount of problems, the amount of infrastructure, the amount of the government gives you trouble, all that stuff, we don't see that. In America is a cakewalk, right, compared to trying to build a business in Brazil or in India or in China. Oh my God, like, you would have never thought of all those problems ever. You think, like, where are these people from? Are they from Mars or what? Like, so I would say, you know, if you want to really be successful and build a global business, yeah, go first and build a business in Brazil or in China or India. And then I'm sure if you take those lessons learned, you apply that kind of low cost, you know, margins, how to navigate through all these issues, you'll be super successful.
You already gave up.
Hi. Do you think that the lack of the laws regulating electronic transactions by internet in Brazil that cause large of numbers of misled consumers that buy and effectively never receive the goods, and nothing happens with the website that's still on, can damage the e-commerce? And also, if it could be a good opportunity for trusted websites as Netshoes, Amazon, to take advantage of these websites that consumers just don't trust. That's why don't buy, because never know if you will really receive the good or not. Could be one opportunity for trusted websites, even paying importation taxes and all the things that have, because you know, have taxes for employee people in Brazil, so can still profitable, still competitive, even including import taxes. Could be a good opportunity for foreign e-commerce websites to invest in Brazil. To Renata, or?
In addition, I'll make a comment, because you said something that we didn't debate, is trust. I think in the US we went through that phase where the trust in e-commerce wasn't there. We had lots of issues with spamming, fraudulent charges in sites, and we're seeing that both in m-commerce and e-commerce in Brazil. It's well known, and there's a bigger problem with trust, because just generally how the country issues we have. So I think trust probably is the number one issue to address, and it'll be a very difficult issue to address, don't you think?
Yeah, but there are some certifier institutions like Site Blindado, EBIT, and they go and rate the safety systems of internet companies. And it's really interesting that if you go look at a Brazilian e-commerce website, it's a very prominent thing to have those logos. Right? In the US, you don't see those like stamps of approval, and they make it this big. And for them to get like a diamond EBIT thing is like a big thing for them, and they just almost put it bigger than their own logo on the homepage. So yes, it's an important point, and there's some certifier institutions, so you should look for those logos, and if they're not there, beware. But you know, the prior panel mentioned, like today, there's social media, there's Reclama Aí. I mean, people have avenues to go. Yeah, you might not get your money back, but there's a lot of damage you can do to the brand. And if you go to Facebook and whatever and just say, these guys frauded me and so on and so forth, there's no brand that can survive like that. And that wasn't true 4 or 5 years ago in terms of just social media penetration and availability of those channels. So there are other recourses that you can do.
We're running out of time, so
yeah, but going forward, not by getting your money back.
We're going to take one more question.
Great, thank you. I think you're leading a great panel. So I have one question with regards to what we've been hearing about this morning, a lot of opportunity in Brazil, e-commerce, mobile, companies opening offices in Brazil. What can you share with us with regards to the experiences you're finding with the essential telecommunications backbone that will make what you're trying to achieve doable?
Ron?
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. I think it's, you know, there's kind of two Brazils, right? If you're in Sao Paulo, you know, I've been all over Sao Paulo, and it's fantastic. It took me a long time to get from one place to another, but you know, you never had any trouble. You never had any trouble. You rarely have trouble with cell phones, and really, you know, pretty reasonable speeds too. I haven't spent as much time in Rio, but my understanding is that Rio is very similar. And then there's, you know, other cities like Minas Gerais, and if you go a little farther, we were in Campinas and a few other cities, and again, it seemed pretty reasonable. So I think if you stay, you know, certainly in the mega metropolitans and the smaller cities, smaller, you know, medium-sized cities, you're doing pretty well. But then as soon as you get out, yeah, it becomes a problem. Just connectivity, you know, the quality of the network, and it gets bad very quick. Like, you don't have to go very far out of the city to start feeling that your reception isn't as good as you would like.
Very true. The one thing that we have seen, Wi-Fi networks have grown tremendously in Brazil. Yeah. So that has been helping the communication to stabilize. You still see a big difference in quality of services between the carriers. The top three carriers will have one standard. The bottom three will have completely different standards, which you don't see in the US. You see a more level quality of service. But overall, I'll say it's pretty reasonable.
Yeah. Well, there's a great cottage industry of apps that find free open Wi-Fi. So as you walk around, it's like, hey, look, there's a free Wi-Fi. You can just jump on here, jump all over the place. So that's yet another example of you know, trying to figure things out.
Thank you very much for the time. Okay, we'll take the last one. How's that?
No, it's not a question, it's a comment. I worked with imports in Brazil for a long time, and here in the US for a very long time. And just some curiosities. It's so difficult to import in Brazil. And in the documentation, they still want the documents to be printed on those carbon copies they're printed on those printers that has the holes on the sides, because that means it's an original. Signatures of the import documents have to be in blue pen. God forbid you receive your documents via email and you print in your printer right next to your desk. It's more likely that you're faking this document. And on the documentation that goes with the cargo, the bill of lading, they want to compare the weight of the empty container with the weight of the full container minus the weight that you say that your cargo has. So if there is a very small difference in this math, you got to go to the pier and open your container, and it's a big thing. So it's very difficult to import. It's doable. You just need to know how to navigate jeitinho, talk, and all that stuff.
Well, so that's the answer why Amazon is not there.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
There you go.
Bezos doesn't have this patience.
That's it. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Renata, Ron, Karl, Ron.